My husband threw the divorce papers at me and kicked me out of the house for his mistress. But in 48 hours my husband kicked me out of the house for the woman he was cheating on me with. He forgot that this house and the company were mine. Watch how I leave him on the street in 48 hours. In the silence of the vast living room, the sound of something being thrown echoed like a gunshot. A large manila envelope landed sharply on the Italian marble table. It slid a little, bumping against the crystal vase holding the white lilies I had just arranged that morning. Sign it. Now. Javier Garcia stood there. His breathing was heavy, his face flushed not with shame, but with the fury he felt entitled to unleash. The sleeves of the Armani suit I had bought him for his birthday last month were slightly wrinkled, a sign that he had vented his emotions elsewhere before coming home. I slowly set down my cup of Earl Grey tea. The delicate clink of porcelain against the saucer contrasted with my husband's violent demeanor. I looked at him, then at the envelope. These are the divorce papers. My voice was flat. Not just divorce papers, Carmen. It's your ticket out of this hell of a marriage, Javier spat. He loosened his tie abruptly. I'm sick of it, sick of your coldness, of the way you keep this house like a museum, and most importantly, I've found someone who truly respects me as a man. I wasn't surprised. Of course there was another woman. The cheap vanilla perfume that had been clinging to his suits when he walked through the front door for the past 2 months had already alerted me. Her name is Valeria, Javier continued, as if he had read my mind or wanted to twist the knife deeper. And she needs security, so this is security. I want you out of this house. He leaned forward, placing both hands on the marble table, staring at me with a menacing look that seemed straight out of a mob movie. I'm giving you 48 hours, Carmen. 48 hours to pack your personal belongings, clothes, makeup, whatever, but the furniture, the paintings, and this house are mine. My new girlfriend, Valeria, deserves this house. She wants to redecorate it next week. I looked around the living room at the 20-foot-high ceilings, the baccarat crystal chandelier, the marble floor specially imported from Tuscany. Javier thought this house was his because for the last 5 years of our marriage, I had let him believe he was the king of this castle. I let his ego grow, watering it with compliments and white lies that his CEO's salary was enough to maintain our lifestyle. The truth was, Javier's salary barely covered the property taxes on this house. Javier. My voice was soft but cold. Do you really want to do this? Kick me out in 48 hours. Of course, he replied arrogantly. Don't even think about a division of assets. The company is doing well thanks to my blood, sweat, and tears. And I've paid for this house every month from our joint account. You're just a housewife who got lucky marrying a successful man. So sign, pack your bags, and get out. If you don't, I'll call the community security guards to have you removed in 2 days. I stared at him. There was a cruel satisfaction in his eyes. He was enjoying this moment. He felt he had the power, that he had won. Slowly, the corners of my lips curved upward. It wasn't a smile of fear or sadness. It was the faint smile of a chess player who sees their opponent move the queen to the wrong square, clearing the path to checkmate. All right, I replied calmly. I accept the envelope. 48 hours. That's more than enough time. Javier snorted, thinking I had surrendered. He didn't know that in the next 48 hours I wouldn't just be leaving this house. I would make sure that the moment I walked through that door, Javier would be left without a single roof over his head under the Madrid sky. Good. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Valeria is coming over soon to see her new home. Javier turned and left, leaving me alone with the divorce papers. I glanced at the old wall clock in the corner. 47 hours and 50 minutes remained. The game had begun. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Javier was in the shower. I could hear the water running upstairs. With quiet steps, I opened the heavy designer wooden door. On the doorstep stood a young woman, probably in her early 20s. She was beautiful, to be honest. Perfectly blow-dried long hair. A tight red dress a bit too low-cut for a daytime visit. She looked me up and down, her eyes scanning my appearance, dressed in a simple silk house dress without a single piece of flashy jewelry. Are you the maid? Oh wait, you must be Carmen. Her voice was sharp and filled with disdain. And you must be Valeria, I replied, opening the door a little wider. Please come in. Valeria walked in without an invitation, her high heels clacking sharply on the marble. She immediately looked around, her eyes gleaming with greed at the opulence of our foyer. "Wow," she muttered, but then she snorted. "A bit old-fashioned. Too much beige and gold. It looks tacky. When I move in, I'll change everything to a more modern, minimalist industrial style." She pointed to a large abstract painting on the wall. It was an original Anthony Tapies, worth as much as 2 of Javier's luxury cars. "That is really ugly. It'll have to go." I closed the door gently, suppressing my emotions. "Would you like something to drink, Miss Valeria?" "An iced coffee, no sugar," she ordered without even looking at me, as if I were a waitress in a cafe. She walked to the living room, touching our Italian leather sofa with hands full of costume jewelry rings. I went to the kitchen. There Mrs. Rosa, our loyal housekeeper who had worked for my family since I was a child, looked at me with tear-filled eyes. She must have overheard the earlier altercation. "Ma'am," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The master. He's going too far." "Shoo." I put a finger to my lips. "Don't cry. Prepare an iced coffee for our guest, and activate all the security cameras in the house on high-definition audio recording mode. Right now." Mrs. Rosa's eyes widened for a moment. Then, wiping away her tears, she nodded with determination. She knew that when I gave specific instructions, I was up to something. I returned to the living room with a tray holding the iced coffee and some snacks. Just then Javier came down the stairs. His hair was damp, and he was wearing a comfortable polo shirt. His face lit up when he saw Valeria. "Darling," Javier exclaimed, opening his arms. Valeria ran to him and threw herself into his embrace. "Right in front of me, Javier. The house is huge, but the taste is so outdated. We'll have to renovate everything." "Anything for you, my love," Javier said, kissing her on the forehead. He shot me a look. His gaze was cold. "Carmen, don't just stand there. Leave the drinks and go up to your room. We need to be alone." I placed the tray carefully on the table. Valeria picked up her glass, took a sip and frowned. A little bitter, but whatever. She sat on my husband's lap on a single sofa, speaking in a coddled voice. "When will the papers be ready? I want to throw a housewarming party soon. My friends will die of envy." "She'll be gone the day after tomorrow," Javier replied nonchalantly, his hand around Valeria's waist. 48 hours. After that, this house is officially our palace. The deeds aren't in my name yet, but that's just a formality. My lawyer says that since it's the house we lived in together, I have full rights to it. I was standing near the threshold to the dining room, half hidden, but close enough to hear everything. My phone in my dress pocket had been recording the whole time. "But that woman won't ask for anything, will she?" Valeria asked, concerned. "And the Mercedes she drives will be ours too?" "Don't worry," Javier laughed dismissively. "Carmen is clueless about legal or financial matters. She's never worked a day in her life. She's just lived comfortably off my salary. She doesn't have the money to hire a good lawyer. At best, she'll go back to her parents' house in some village in La Mancha." I had to suppress a laugh. My parents in La Mancha. My father was a diplomat in Switzerland, and my mother was one of the biggest art collectors in Southeast Asia. Javier had never met them. My excuse was that they were busy, to hide the fact that they never approved of my marriage to a man they called a social climbing opportunist. "How wonderful," Valeria giggled. "I can't wait to be Mrs. Garcia." They kissed. It was a disgusting scene, but a very useful one. I turned off the recording in my pocket and headed to my study, hidden behind the library. They thought they had one. They had no idea that every word they had just uttered was another nail in their own financial coffin. 45 hours remained. The clock struck the early hours of the morning. The house was silent. Javier and Valeria were asleep. Ironically, Valeria had insisted on sleeping in the master bedroom, implicitly kicking me out. Javier, on the other hand, whether out of a shred of shame or fear of breaking the rules too quickly, had settled in the guest room. I was in my study, the only space to which I alone held the key. This room was perfectly soundproofed. I turned on a dim desk lamp and opened a safe hidden behind a shelf of old encyclopedias. Inside there was no cash, but a stack of documents bearing the logo of a multinational corporation, Mendoza Holding. My mother's maiden name was Mendoza, and that name controlled 40% of Madrid's commercial real estate sector. I took out a special phone I only used for business matters, a phone Javier never knew existed. I dialed number 1 on speed dial. Yes, Director de la Torre. The voice on the other end was clear and alert, despite it being midnight. It was Lawyer Morales, head of the legal department at Mendoza Holding and my personal attorney. Mr. Morales, I'm sorry to bother you at this hour. My voice had become sharp and authoritative, very different from the submissive wife's voice Javier was used to hearing. It's no bother at all, Director. Is it urgent? Activate the Black Swan protocol on Javier Garcia's assets, I ordered. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure, Director? That protocol will strip him of everything, including his CEO position at Innovatech Solutions. I'm sure, I replied coldly. He has violated clauses 14 and 15 of our prenuptial agreement. Adultery and attempted unilateral forced appropriation of assets. I have video and audio evidence from today's security cameras. I heard rapid typing on the other end. Accessing the data. Yes. According to the secret investment agreement Mr. Garcia signed 5 years ago, thinking it was a mere formality with an angel investor. The ownership of his shares in Innovatech was subject to vesting conditions tied to performance and moral integrity. With the evidence you have, we can activate the unilateral share buyback clause at zero nominal value for gross breach of contract. Do it. Block his access to company accounts tomorrow morning. And Mr. Morales. Yes, Director. Verify the status of the deeds to this house. Make sure the prohibition preventing any notary from proceeding with a change of ownership without my fingerprint is already active. That was processed automatically, Director. The deed to the La Moraleja mansion is in the name of Carmen de la Torre Mendoza. It's a separately inherited asset. Your husband has no right to a single cent. Even if he made renovations to the house, they are considered a voluntary gift. I smiled with satisfaction. Good. One more thing. Contact our bank manager and freeze our joint account. The funds transferred from my personal account must be returned to my trust account. Leave only this month's salary from Mr. Garcia in that account. Understood. It will be executed at 8 a.m. when the banks open. Do you need anything else? Prepare an eviction team for 40 hours from now. I want the police and a court officer to accompany them. I don't want any physical drama that could pose a risk to me. Understood, Director. Get some rest. I hung up the phone. I leaned back in my leather chair, looking at a photo from our wedding that was still on the desk. I once hid my identity because I wanted to be loved for who I was. I wanted Javier to develop his confidence, to feel like a successful head of the family. I injected funds into his company through a shell corporation. I got him major projects through my uncle's contacts, all without his knowledge. I let him think he was a genius. But genius without humility breeds a monster. And now that monster was trying to devour its creator. I stood up. I had one more thing to do that night. An asset inventory. 40 hours remained. The grand house was filled with valuables, but Javier was too foolish to know what had real value. He believed an object's worth came from the size of its logo. He was proud of his 80-inch television and his leather sofa, but he was blind to the value of art. I moved like a ghost through my own home. I brought a special hardshell suitcase from the basement. My first target was the wall in the central hallway. 3 paintings hung there. To Javier, they were just strange abstract pictures I had bought at a gallery in the Salamanca district. To a collector, they were original early sketches by Anthony Tapies. I carefully took them down and replaced them with high-quality replicas I had prepared in advance at a secret warehouse. I had commissioned them 6 months ago, when I first began to suspect Javier's infidelity. The difference between the original and the fake was almost imperceptible to an untrained eye. Javier would never notice. Next, the jewelry. I entered the walk-in closet next to the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I heard Valeria's snoring from the bedroom. With very quiet steps, I opened the wall safe behind the mirror. Javier knew the combination to this safe. Inside was a set of diamonds, a Rolex watch, and some gold bars. But what Javier didn't know was that this safe had a false bottom. I lifted the velvet lining at the bottom of the safe. Underneath were the real documents. The house deeds, the registration for Javier's sports car, which was actually purchased in my company's name, passports, and government bonds. I took everything out and then did a little mischief. I took Javier's Patek Philippe watch, a birthday gift from last year that cost 100,000 euros. I put it in my suitcase and replaced it with a high-quality replica I had bought online on a whim. The appearance was identical. The weight too, but the internal mechanism would barely last a week. Finally, I went to the garage. The cars were neatly parked. Javier's Porsche and my Mini Cooper. I opened the hood of the Porsche and, using a technique my car enthusiast father had taught me, I removed a small fuse. The fuel pump fuse. Tomorrow morning that car wouldn't start. I wanted to see his face when his symbol of pride refused to cooperate. After securely packing all the valuables in the hardshell suitcase, I took it to the back door. There my loyal personal driver, Mr. Matteo, was waiting with an unmarked black van. "Take this to the apartment on Serrano Street, Mr. Matteo. The key is in the safe as always," I whispered. "Understood, Mississippi. Will you be all right here?" Mr. Matteo asked with concern. "I'll be perfectly fine, Mr. Matteo. The real show begins tomorrow." The van drove away silently. I went back inside a house that now seemed a little emptier to my eyes, but which to Javier would still look luxurious. The entire lifeblood of this house, its liquid assets and valuable art, were already gone. What remained was just an empty shell that would soon collapse and crush Javier. I returned to my study and lay down on the sofa. I needed to sleep. Tomorrow I had to act again. 36 hours remained. The morning light filtered through the study's curtains. I woke up feeling refreshed. Strangely, there were no tears or confusion, only a sharp focus. I showered and dressed carefully. I wore an elegant but sober knee-length navy blue dress. I went down to the dining room, where Mrs. Rosa had already prepared breakfast. Huevos rotos con jamón, Javier's favorite dish. Javier and Valeria came down 10 minutes later. They looked like a couple who had just won the lottery. Valeria was wearing my silk kimono. She must have taken it from the master bedroom closet. What nerve, but I let it be. The higher they fly, the harder they fall. "Good morning, ex-wife," Javier greeted me mockingly. He sat at the head of the table. "Have you signed the papers?" I placed a plate of huevos rotos in front of him. "They're on the living room table." Javier immediately forgot about breakfast. He dragged Valeria into the living room. I followed calmly. Javier grabbed the envelope, took out the papers and flipped to the last page. His eyes widened when he saw my signature neatly stamped on the dotted line. "Finally!" he exclaimed, holding the paper up in the air like a trophy. "Look, darling," she surrendered. "This house is ours." Valeria squealed with joy and hugged Javier tightly. "Oh, Javier, you're amazing. Goodbye, Carmen." Javier looked at me. A triumphant smile adorned his face. "Well done, Carmen. You know your place. Since you've cooperated, I'll be kind. You can use a company truck tomorrow to move your things. But remember, not a single appliance or piece of furniture. Those are my assets." "Thank you for your generosity, Javier," I replied dryly. "I'll start packing today." "Oh, and one more thing," Javier said, pointing at Valeria. "Valeria wants to use your walk-in closet now, so clear out your vanity within the hour. She needs space for her makeup." "Of course," I replied. "Make yourselves at home." Javier, his morale soaring, returned to the dining room to devour his breakfast. Valeria ran upstairs, excited by the idea of conquering her new territory. I stood silently in the living room watching Javier's back. He hadn't read the fine print, hadn't read section 2 on page 4 about the division of assets. Nor did he realize that under my signature, I had dated the document with the previous day's date next to my legal representative's initials, which technically invalidated it if he tried to use it to kick me out before a court ruling. But most importantly, he didn't know that my signature was the trigger. The moment he signed the papers and kept them, Lawyer Morales would receive a notification. I had just sent a coded text message. Signature complete. It was the signal to start phase 2. The total freeze. I watched Javier devour the huevos rotos. "Enjoy your last meal as a rich man, Javier. This afternoon you won't even have money to buy a bottle of water." I headed upstairs to pack the few clothes I had. Mentally, I started a countdown. In a few hours, Javier would go to the office, and that's when his real world would collapse. 34 hours remained. After dropping Valeria off at a mall, she had made the excuse that she wanted to cheer herself up by window shopping. Though perhaps she was already starting to doubt him, Javier drove towards the Innovatech Solutions offices on Paseo de la Castellana. He needed answers. Why had all his cards been declined? Why wasn't the bank answering him? His mind was in chaos. He concluded it must be a national banking system error, or that a hacker had attacked his accounts. Not for a moment did he think I could be the cause. In his eyes, Carmen was just a technophobic housewife. Javier parked in his reserved spot, marked So Javier Garcia. He entered the skyscraper's lobby with an air of importance, trying to regain the dignity he had lost at the restaurant. He approached the access turnstiles and swiped his ID card. Beep beep. Red light. The metal barrier didn't turn. Javier frowned. He swiped the card again, harder. Beep beep. Red light. What's wrong today? Javier cursed. He saw the line of employees behind him growing longer. Some were muttering. Mr. Ramos, Javier shouted to the lobby's head of security. Open it for me manually. I think my card is broken. The burly man, who usually bowed respectfully when Javier passed, this time stood firm at his post. He approached, but not to open the gate. His face was expressionless. I'm sorry, Mr. CEO. Your card isn't broken. It's deactivated, Mr. Ramos said firmly. Deactivated? I own this company. Who dares to deactivate my card? Javier shouted. His voice echoed in the vast marble lobby. Orders from the board of directors and the majority shareholder, sir. As of this afternoon, you are prohibited from accessing the premises. Javier laughed. A hysterical-sounding laugh. Majority shareholder? I own 20% of the shares. That anonymous investor has never interfered in management. This is a coup. At that moment, the elevator opened. Miss Diaz, Javier's personal secretary for 3 years, came out with a medium-sized cardboard box. Miss Diaz, who usually smiled sweetly at him and called him a great boss, now looked at him with strange, cold eyes. She passed through the turnstiles and handed the box to Javier. Your personal effects, Mr. CEO, Miss Diaz said in an official tone. The family photo, your mug, and the phone charger. The laptop and work documents have been retained by the audit team. Miss Diaz, what's all this about? Explain it to me, Javier said, grabbing her by the shoulder. Mr. Ramos quickly pushed Javier's hand away. Don't touch the staff, Mr. CEO. Miss Diaz adjusted her jacket. Mendoza Holding, which owns 80% of Innovatech's shares, has activated an emergency clause. You have been temporarily suspended from your position as CEO for alleged misappropriation of company funds for personal gain and gross ethical misconduct. Mendoza Holding. Javier was speechless. The name sounded familiar. The name of a real estate giant. Since when were they his investors? He thought his investor was a foreign consortium. Who's the president? I need to speak with him. Mrs. Carmen de la Torre Mendoza, Miss Diaz replied calmly. That name hit Javier like a hammer. His mouth opened but no sound came out. Carmen, he whispered. My wife. Carmen, your ex-wife, Mr. CEO, according to the papers you yourself threw this morning, Miss Diaz corrected sharply. And for your information, the Porsche you parked out front is a company asset. The legal department has already called a tow truck. We recommend you go home by taxi. Miss Diaz turned around and went back inside, leaving Javier like a statue, clutching a box with his trinkets. The employees who once flattered him now walked past him with their heads down or pretending to look at their phones. Javier felt naked, diminished. Carmen's maiden name was Mendoza. How could he have forgotten? How could he have been so stupid as not to connect Carmen with Mendoza Holding? He had always thought Carmen was just the daughter of a rich, carefree family, never that she was the owner of the corporate giant holding his leash. 2 security guards approached. Please leave the lobby, sir, or we'll have to call the police. Staggering, Javier went outside. The scorching Madrid sun seemed to burn his skin. He saw his prized yellow Porsche being hooked up to a tow truck. He wanted to scream, but he had no strength. He fumbled in his pockets to call a taxi online, But he remembered he had no data and the credit card registered in the app would already be cancelled. Javier, clutching the box with his own photo, which now seemed like a mockery, stood at the edge of Paseo de la Castellana and raised his hand to hail a regular taxi. 26 hours remained. While Javier struggled to get a taxi in rush-hour traffic, Valeria was living her own little apocalypse in the El Corte Inglés parking lot. Valeria walked elegantly to the VIP parking area. She had only been window shopping, as the nearly maxed-out credit card she used for lunch didn't allow her to buy anything. She was looking forward to getting into the white Mercedes C-Class that Javier had lent her a month ago. It was her status symbol, the proof that she had conquered a rich man. But when she reached spot A12, it was empty. Valeria blinked, checked the column number. Yes, A12. It's been stolen. She panicked. She ran immediately to the parking lot security office. Sir, my car has disappeared. A white Mercedes license plate BO. She yelled at the employee. The employee calmly checked the data on his computer. One moment, ma'am. License plate. Feuds. Here it is. The vehicle was not stolen, but repossessed by its official owner with a spare key about 20 minutes ago. What? The official owner is my boyfriend, Javier Garcia. He wouldn't take it without telling me. I'm sorry, ma'am. According to the vehicle registration information presented by the repossession team, the owner of the vehicle is a subsidiary of Mendoza Group. They brought an asset recovery order for unauthorized use by a third party. Valeria fell silent. Her slow brain began to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Mendoza Group. She had heard Javier mention it as one of his main clients. But why would they repossess Javier's car? Valeria tried to call Javier. The number you are calling is not available. She tried again. The number. Valeria stomped her foot. People started to stare at her. A woman in expensive clothes shouting in the security office. And how am I supposed to get home now? She snapped at the guard as if it were his fault. There's a taxi stand in the west lobby, ma'am, the guard replied dryly. Valeria stormed out, her face red. She imagined the humiliation of having to wait for a normal blue taxi mixed in with the rest of the people, while wearing a Gucci dress she had bought last month with Javier's card. In the taxi, which smelled of orange air freshener, Valeria finally managed to speak with Javier. She had to call his regular phone number, as her WhatsApp seemed not to be working. She didn't know Javier had no data. Hello, Javier. Where the hell are you? Valeria shouted as soon as the call connected. Don't shout. I have my own problems. Javier's voice sounded tired and angry. The company had my car towed. They took my car too. They said it belonged to some company or something. You said it was yours. It's complicated, Valeria. I'll explain at home. Come home now to that hell house. I'm hungry, Javier. I want a nice dinner. Just come, Valeria. Carmen will have made something at home. Javier hung up. Valeria looked at her phone screen, incredulous. Carmen had cooked? So they were going to eat food prepared by the ex-wife they had just kicked out. The situation was becoming increasingly surreal. Valeria began to feel that the ship she was sailing on was sinking, and she had no life vest. But she had no other choice. With no money, no car, and having already sublet her apartment because she was sure she would be moving into Javier's house, she was trapped. 22 hours remained. The house smelled delicious, not of air freshener, but of the appetizing aroma of rosemary, garlic, and roasted meat. I was in the kitchen, wearing a spotless white apron over my house dress. The dining table was perfectly set. Linen tablecloth, silverware inherited from my grandmother, and lit candles. The front door burst open. Javier came in. His shirt was soaked with sweat under the armpits. His face was a mess like a crumpled piece of paper. He wasn't carrying his briefcase, had obviously been confiscated, only that stupid box. 10 minutes later, Valeria came in. She was just as disheveled. Her hair, flattened by the sweat and humidity of Madrid, and her makeup slightly smudged. They met in the middle of the living room, looking at each other with a mixture of exhaustion and confusion. Welcome. I greeted them from the dining room. My voice was cheerful. You're just in time. The beef Wellington just came out of the oven. Javier looked at me with an indescribable expression. There was anger but also fear. Carmen, What did you do at the company? Let's have dinner first, Javier, I interrupted gently. Never talk business on an empty stomach, right? That was one of your rules. I sat in the chair at the head of the table, the host's seat. Normally Javier sat there, but this time I took it. Javier had no choice but to sit to my right, and Valeria hesitantly to my left. I poured water into their glasses. I had already put away the expensive red wine. They didn't deserve it. Carmen, Javier's voice trembled. He didn't touch the food. My secretary says you're the owner of Innovatech. That's a lie, isn't it? Are you trying to scare me into canceling the divorce? I calmly cut a piece of meat from my plate. Eat, Valeria. It's imported Avila beef. It might be the last time you eat meat of this quality. Valeria glared at me, but her stomach rumbled. She began to eat voraciously, forgetting her manners. I turned to Javier. Javier, where do you think your seed capital came from 5 years ago? From your farmer parents' inheritance in some village, or from your savings that you always spent on tuning cars? Javier remained silent. His face turned pale. I invested that capital through my uncle's venture capital fund. I was the one who got you your first clients, and I was the one who made sure your financial audits came out clean. Even though you often siphoned off small amounts of money for soccer bets. Javier clenched his fists. You've been deceiving me all this time, making me believe I was the successful one. I wanted my husband to have self-esteem, I replied sharply. I gave you a stage, Javier, but you used that stage to spit on the audience. And it turns out that audience was me. Give me back my access. Javier shouted, slamming the table. The plates trembled. I built that company. I worked day and night. Day and night. I laughed softly. A cold laugh that chilled to the bone. According to your phone's GPS data and the company's expense records, you spent 40% of your work time in 5-star hotels, spas, and karaoke bars with fake clients. That's not working, Javier, that's stealing. I'll sue you. With what money? I asked indifferently. Your account is empty. Your credit cards are canceled. Your car is confiscated. Even your best lawyer at the Garrigues firm is a golfing buddy of my father's. I doubt he'll take your call. Javier fell silent. Reality began to seep into his thick skull. He really had nothing. Valeria stopped eating. She suddenly dropped her fork. Wait a minute. So Javier is really broke. Completely. He's not broke, Valeria, I corrected. He's been restored to his factory settings. Valeria looked at Javier with a new kind of hatred. You said you were a tycoon. You said this house was yours. This is just a misunderstanding, Valeria, Javier said, trying to take her hand. But Valeria pulled it away. Well, I stood up. The dinner show is over. Finish eating and go to bed. Tomorrow is an important day. Your deadline ends in 24 hours. I left Javier in despair and Valeria, who had begun to calculate her losses, in the dining room. The atmosphere between them was now toxic. The foundations of their relationship, built on money and lust, crumbled as soon as the money disappeared. 15 hours remained. 2 a.m. The huge house was plunged into total darkness. I made sure Javier and Valeria had retired to their respective rooms. An hour ago, the sound of their fight had reached my room downstairs. Valeria was screaming scam, and Javier was yelling about loyalty. A very boring drama. Now it was time for the isolation phase. From my firmly locked room, I sat in front of my laptop. I accessed the house's home automation system. Phase 1. Cut the internet connection. I disabled the main router. The Wi-Fi for the entire house went out. In this era, without internet, a human being is like losing oxygen. Since they no longer had data, they couldn't call a taxi online, contact friends on WhatsApp, or read the news. Phase 2. Communication isolation. I used a portable signal jammer, legally purchased to protect my privacy, which blocked mobile phone signals in a 50-meter radius. Now their phones were just useless pieces of glass and metal. No one could make or receive calls, except from the landline in my room. Phase 3. Digital lockdown. I changed the passwords for the front door, the garage door, and the entrance gate. The previous password was 123,456. Javier was really lazy. The new password? The date of our divorce. Phase 4. Temperature control. This was my personal touch. I set the air conditioning in the master bedroom, where Valeria was sleeping, to the lowest temperature, 16 degrees Celsius. Let her freeze. On the other hand, I completely turned off the air conditioning in the guest room where Javier was sleeping. That night, Madrid was an oven. Let him sweat in his own sins. Done. I closed the laptop. The house was now a prison for them and a fortress for me. When they woke up in the morning, they would realize they were trapped with no car, no communication, no money, and even physically uncomfortable. The psychological pressure would reach its peak. Human nature reveals itself when cornered. I wanted to see how great Valeria's love was when Javier couldn't even offer her comfort. And I wanted to see how great Javier's pride was when he had to beg me for a glass of water. I got into bed. I was going to sleep very soundly that night. Outside, the night wind howled silently. The wall clock kept ticking towards total annihilation. 23 hours remained. The Madrid sun had not yet fully risen, but its heat was already beginning to seep through the ventilation ducts. In the guest room, Javier woke up panting as if he had just run a marathon. Sweat soaked his t-shirt, sticking disgustingly to the skin on his back. He fumbled for the air conditioner remote with half-closed eyes and pressed the power button several times in frustration. It was off. The indicator light on the air conditioner was dark. Javier groaned and threw the remote on the floor. He felt like he was being roasted alive in a concrete oven. Meanwhile, across the hall, in the luxurious master bedroom, Valeria was waking up in a completely opposite state. She was shivering violently under the thick goose-down comforter, which usually felt luxurious but now felt like a slab of ice. Her lips were blue and her teeth were chattering. She saw that the air conditioner control panel on the wall read 16 degrees Celsius. With the power cooling mode locked, she tried to raise the temperature, but the panel did not respond to the touch of her fingers. It was locked from the central system. Damn it! Valeria shouted in a broken voice. They both came out of their respective rooms at almost the same time. They met face to face. Javier, drenched in sweat and smelly, and Valeria, wrapped in the thick comforter like a huge silk cocoon. Valeria's face was pale and her nose was running. They turned their heads towards the second-floor balcony. There I was, sitting comfortably in a rattan chair enjoying the naturally cool morning breeze. On the small table next to me was a cup of single-origin Colombian coffee giving off an aromatic steam, along with a butter croissant just delivered by my regular delivery person through the side door to which only I had the key. Good morning, I greeted them cheerfully without looking up from the tablet I was reading. Did you sleep well? What have you done to the air conditioning, Carmen? Javier shouted, wiping the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. My room was a hell, and mine was the North Pole, Valeria added, sneezing loudly. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the bitter and acidic aroma stimulate my senses before answering. Oh, yes, I suppose the home automation system is adjusting priorities. The electricity bill is expensive, Javier. And since your account is empty, I have to save. It prioritizes the comfort of the person who pays the bills. It's fair, isn't it? Javier took an aggressive step forward. His face was red. Turn on the internet right now. I can't even check my emails. There's no cell service in this house. I can't open Instagram, Valeria complained. You know there's life beyond a mobile screen? I replied indifferently, turning a page of digital news on my tablet, connected to my personal Wi-Fi network, a hidden network they didn't know about. But if you need something to entertain yourselves with, I suggest you start packing. You only have 23 hours left. I want to take a hot shower, Valeria demanded. I'm freezing. Go ahead, I said with a lopsided smile. But if I remember correctly, the water heater in the master bedroom is connected to the gas system, and the technician took the gas cylinder this morning for non-payment. Valeria screamed in frustration and stomped her foot, running back to the bathroom, perhaps hoping for a miracle. The sound of a cold water spray was heard, followed by Valeria's shriek of surprise. A few seconds later, Javier looked at me with a murderous gaze. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Very much, I replied frankly, looking him straight in the eye. Before, I did everything possible to make you comfortable. I adjusted the temperature of the house. I made sure the internet was fast for your games, that there was hot water. You never noticed because you took it for granted. Now I've stopped being your genie in a lamp, Javier. Welcome to reality. Javier snorted and turned towards the stairs. I'm going to the bank. I'm going to fix this mess you've created. Don't think you've won. Without a car? I asked. And without a taxi app? Javier stopped for a moment. His back stiffened. Then he continued on his way stubbornly. I'll walk to the community entrance and get a motorbike taxi if I have to. I don't care about you. I watched him go down the stairs with heavy steps. The man who yesterday arrogantly threw the divorce papers now had to walk 2 kilometers under the Madrid morning sun to find cheap transportation. I returned to my tablet. The stock chart for Mendoza Holding was up that morning. Life went on. 20 hours remained. Javier returned 3 hours later. His appearance was even more pitiful than when he left. The shirt, which had been soaked in sweat overnight, was now stained with street dust and sun-induced sweat. His face was red and his hair was matted. He hadn't easily found a motorbike taxi, and the one he did find refused to take him because he didn't have enough cash. Knowing there was a problem, he made a last attempt at a convenience store ATM, but the result was the same. The card was swallowed by the machine. Javier entered the house and went straight to the landline phone on the living room console. It was the only working means of communication. I was sitting on the living room sofa, painting my nails a blood-red color. Mrs. Rosa, pretending to dust or rather watching just in case, observed me. Javier picked up the receiver with trembling hands and dialed his bank's VIP service number. Hello, this is Javier Garcia, he shouted into the receiver. Why was my card swallowed? Why has all my access been blocked? I could hear the faint voice of the customer service employee on the other end. Calm but procedural. I'm sorry, Mr. Garcia. According to our data, all accounts in your name are currently frozen for investigation at the request of the financial authorities in relation to a complaint of corporate embezzlement. Embezzlement? What are you talking about? That's my money. The complaint was filed by the legal department of Mendoza Holding and Innovatech Solutions. A suspicious flow of funds was detected to the account of a third party unrelated to the business. Javier fell silent. His eyes darted upstairs where Valeria was. Flow of funds to a third party. The money he transferred every month to Valeria for the apartment, the handbags, and the beauty treatments. But my other personal account. That account no longer has a balance, sir. An automatic charge has been made to cover the outstanding debts on the company card and the penalty for termination of the investment contract. Your current balance is minus 150 euros. The receiver fell from Javier's hand. It swung, hitting the leg of the table. Tut tut tut. The sound was like the heartbeat of his financial death sentence. Minus. Not only was he impoverished, he was in debt. Javier turned slowly and looked at me. His face was pale, as if all the blood had been drained from it. He whispered. You've ruined my life. I blew on my freshly painted nails. I correct you, Javier. You ruined your life. You used company money to finance your prostitute. In the business world, that's called embezzlement. It's a criminal offense. I'm your husband. Ex-husband, I retorted coldly. And as the majority shareholder, I have a fiduciary duty to protect my company's assets from a thief, even if that thief slept in the same bed as me for 5 years. Javier collapsed onto the marble floor. His legs gave out. The money, the foundation of his arrogance, had vanished without a trace. He realized he had always been on a stage that I had built, and I had just pulled the rug out from under his feet. Suddenly, Valeria came down the stairs. She had showered, I don't know how, with cold water. She was wearing her best dress and dragging a small suitcase. Javier, Valeria called out. Her voice was demanding. I borrowed the neighbor's phone and called a taxi. It was hard to jump the fence. The taxi is waiting at the community entrance. The strict security guard won't let it in. We're going to a hotel right now. I can't stay here any longer. Javier looked at Valeria with empty eyes. Come on, Javier. Pay for the taxi with the emergency card you keep in your secret wallet, Valeria urged. Javier laughed, a dry, desperate laugh. Emergency card? That card is also cancelled, Valeria. All of them. I'm in debt for over 100,000 euros. Valeria stopped on the last step. The suitcase in her hand fell slowly. What do you mean? Her voice became shrill. I'm broke, Valeria. Completely. Carmen has taken everything. Valeria turned to me. I simply shrugged and smiled kindly. Don't look at me. I've only taken back what's mine. The atmosphere in the living room changed. It was no longer a fight of Javier against Carmen. It was the moment reality hit the fantasy of Valeria and Javier's love. 18 hours remained. What broke the silence wasn't crying, but Valeria's explosion of anger. The mask of a sweet, pampered woman she had worn in front of Javier completely shattered. Her true, calculating nature came to light. Broke. Valeria hissed. Her eyes narrowed, fixed on Javier, who was still slumped on the floor. You said you were a business genius. You said the company was all yours. You lied to me. Javier lifted his head. His face was pathetic. Valeria, listen to me. This is just temporary. I can recover. I have the technology, the contacts. What contacts? Valeria interrupted sharply. They've taken your car, blocked your cards. You can't even pay the electricity bill. Do you think I want to live with a beggar? Valeria, Javier stood up, his pride wounded. Watch what you say. I did all this for us. I divorced my wife for you. And who asked you to? Valeria shouted. Her sharp voice filled the room. I only asked you to buy me an apartment, Javier, not to start a world war with your rich wife. If I had known you were just a puppet funded by your wife, I wouldn't have wasted the last year with you. Those words hit Javier harder than a slap. He staggered back a step. So, all this time it was about the money? Of course. Valeria laughed cynically. A chilling laugh. Love has to eat too, Javier. Love needs skincare and trips to Europe. Do you think I want to live with a bankrupt divorce with a criminal record for embezzlement? No way. I sat silently on my sofa, enjoying the show as if it were a live television drama. It was incredibly satisfying to see their true love disintegrate in minutes as soon as the variable of money was removed from the equation. Gold-digging bitch, Javier hissed. His eyes began to fill with tears of betrayal. I bought you Hermes bags, watches, diamonds. And all of that is evidence of embezzlement, isn't it? Valeria retorted quickly. She looked at the suitcase in her hand and then at me. Mrs. Carmen, if I return some of these things, you won't report me for receiving stolen goods, will you? I laughed softly. Valeria was smart too. Her survival instinct was strong. That's up to you, Miss Valeria. How quickly you leave this house and how cooperative you are later with my audit team. Valeria! Javier shouted in disbelief. Now you're taking her side? Valeria ignored Javier. She looked at me with hopeful eyes. I'm leaving right now. I don't want to get involved in your business. Javier is a liar. I'm a victim here too. Go, I said, waving my hand. The front door isn't locked. But it's heavy, you'll have to push. Valeria nodded quickly, grabbed her suitcase, and crossed the living room without giving Javier a single glance. Valeria, wait. Javier tried to follow her, grabbing her arm. Slap. A resounding slap landed on Javier's cheek. Valeria looked at him with disgust. Don't touch me. Worry about your own situation. Valeria left, slamming the front door behind her. Javier stood like a statue in the middle of the room. His cheek was red with the mark of the fingers of the woman he had, until yesterday, hailed as his soulmate. Now he was alone, truly alone. He turned slowly and looked at me. Tears of rage and despair streamed down his cheeks. His emotions were unstable. He was like a wounded, cornered beast. Satisfied, Carmen? He asked weakly, but his voice had a dangerous tremor. I stood up and smoothed my dress. Not yet. There are still 18 hours left, and you are still in my house. 15 hours remained. Javier did not give up meekly. Humiliation turned into recklessness. He walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water from the tap, as the mineral water dispenser was empty and his pride prevented him from asking me. He drank greedily. He returned to the living room with a different look. The look of a man who, feeling he has nothing left to lose, is capable of anything. You think you can just throw me away like this? Javier began to say in a low, threatening voice. He approached me. The distance between us was now barely 2 meters. Mrs. Rosa, who had been watching from a corner of the dining room, moved forward with a broom in her hand, ready to protect. I gestured for her to calm down. I wasn't afraid of Javier. A man who has lost his power usually barks but doesn't bite. Listen to me, Carmen, Javier said, pointing at my face. I know a lot of company secrets. I know about ongoing projects. If you don't give me a settlement, say about 500,000 euros, and drop the criminal complaint, I will leak all of Innovateca's trade secrets to the competition. I'll ruin your company's reputation. I looked at him with pity. He really didn't understand who he was dealing with. Empty threats, Javier, I replied calmly. What secrets? The Malaga Smart City project has already been awarded to another Mendoza Group subsidiary. The source code for the logistics app project was secured last night by the central IT team. What do you have? A list of client contacts? They are loyal to money, Javier, not to you. And I have the money. Until a judge rules otherwise, legally I'm your husband, Javier shouted, taking another step. I have the right to half the assets. Half of this house is mine. I will file for a division of assets and I will live here until the trial is over. Do you want to live in the same house, killing each other for years? That was his last card. He was trying to blackmail me using marriage law. I walked calmly to the sideboard in the corner and picked up a blue folder. It wasn't the same brown folder with the divorce papers from yesterday. It was another one. Javier, you have a very bad memory, I said as I opened the folder. In 2019, 2 days before our wedding, at Mr. Robles' notary office on Serrano Street, you signed this. I held up the document. Prenuptial agreement for separation of property. Javier frowned, trying to remember. That was just a formality. Your father said it was better to have it separate for tax purposes. Read Clause 7, Section 2, I said, holding the paper up to his face. Javier squinted and read the text I was pointing to. In the event that the marriage ends in divorce due to infidelity/adultery by one of the parties, and this is legally proven, the unfaithful party will automatically waive all rights to claim on the community property formed during the marriage, and will also lose the right to the distribution of profits from any business operated with the capital of the other party during the marriage. Javier's face went from red to ashen gray. And Clause 8, I continued cruelly. The party whose infidelity is proven will be obliged to return, retroactively from the date of the marriage, the value of all capital and amenities provided by the aggrieved party. I closed the folder with a sharp snap. I have videos of you and Valeria. I have audio recordings of your confession. I have the bank records of the transfers to Valeria's account. Legally, Javier, not only will you get nothing, but you owe me the value of all the comforts you've enjoyed for the last 5 years. The rent for this house, the cars, the clothes, the food, everything. I took a step forward, reversing the threat. Now it was I who was pushing him back. So your offer of 500,000 euros is ridiculous. Rather, it is I who should be claiming from you. But I'm being generous. If you leave quietly in the time you have left, maybe, just maybe, I will forget your personal debt. But if you get stubborn and stay here, I brought my face close to his, I will make sure you rot in jail for embezzlement, and when you get out, you will still owe me thousands of euros, a debt you will have to pay until you die. Javier backed away until his back hit the wall. His legs trembled. He saw a demon in my eyes. Or perhaps the grim reaper who would take his future. He couldn't answer. Sheer terror had gripped his throat. Good, I whispered. Save your strength for packing. You'll need it. 12 hours remained. 4 p.m. Javier spent several hours in the guest room. Maybe crying, maybe in shock. I didn't care. I was busy receiving visitors. A luxury black sedan pulled up in front of the house. My lawyer, Mr. Morales, got out along with a neat-looking middle-aged woman, our family notary, Mrs. Robles, and 2 burly men in black suits. My personal security team. Javier came down the stairs when he heard the noise. His eyes were swollen. He saw the group enter the living room. What now? Javier asked weakly. A final formality, Mr. Garcia, said Mr. Morales, courteous but firm, opening his briefcase on the table. By order of Director de la Torre, we have come to read the statement of assets and officially serve you with the eviction order from the property. Javier sat in a chair in a corner. He seemed small in front of these legal professionals. Mrs. Robles opened a large green-covered document. Property in La Moraleja, Madrid. Registry number 1024. Owner, Carmen de la Torre Mendoza. Acquired by legacy in 2015. Inherited asset. No disputes or registered encumbrances. Mrs. Robles looked at Javier over her glasses. Mr. Garcia, legally you have no right to reside here for a single day without the owner's permission. Your stay here was based solely on your wife's verbal permission, and today that permission has been revoked in writing. Mr. Morales handed him a paper. This is the order. You have until tomorrow at 9 a.m., exactly 48 hours from the verbal ultimatum you yourself presented. If you exceed that time, we will file a complaint for trespassing with the National Police. The police are already on notice. Javier looked at the paper. His hand didn't move to take it. Why? Javier's voice was a broken whisper. Why are you so cruel, Carmen? What did I do to you to deserve to be so completely destroyed? That question silenced the room. Mr. Morales and Mrs. Robles bowed their heads for a moment to give us a private space. I looked at Javier with expressionless eyes. There was no hatred left, only a void. You ask why? My voice was calm. Javier, I gave you the world. I gave you love, support, capital, and dignity. I hid your flaws from my family. I defended you when my parents said you weren't worthy. I took a deep breath. And in return, you not only betrayed me, but you humiliated me in my own home. You brought another woman into my bed. You tried to kick me out of the house I inherited from my grandmother. You didn't just break my heart, Javier. You tried to trample on my pride. I stood up straight. I'm not cruel. I'm just a mirror. I reflect what you did to me. You threw a stone. I'm giving you back a mountain. Javier bowed his head deeply. His shoulders shook. He was crying. Tears of regret? No, more likely tears of self-pity. Sign the acknowledgement of receipt of this order, Mr. Garcia, Mr. Morales ordered, breaking the emotional moment. It is to ensure the eviction proceeds smoothly tomorrow. With a trembling hand, Javier signed the paper. His ink stroke was weak and messy. It was the signature of his defeat. Mr. Morales and Mrs. Robles collected their documents. We will return tomorrow at 9 a.m. with the police director to ensure the eviction is carried out safely. Thank you, Mr. Morales, Mrs. Robles, I said. They left, leaving Javier still sobbing quietly in a corner. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting long dark shadows inside the house. Javier's last night in the palace he once claimed as his own was approaching, and tomorrow he would turn back into dust. 11 hours remained. 9 p.m. Javier's last night in the house fell heavily, as if the very roof of the house was crushing his shoulders. The electricity on the ground floor, where the guest room was still completely cut off. Carmen had not turned it back on. The darkness was absolute, only broken by the faint moonlight filtering through the large, curtainless windows. Javier was curled up on the expensive living room sofa. His stomach rumbled loudly. He hadn't eaten anything since the beef Wellington the night before. The hunger was real, sharp, and humiliating. He tried to sleep, but his brain and his stomach conspired to keep him awake. From upstairs, a warm light spilled down the staircase. A faint scent of jasmine tea and luxury bath soap floated in the air. That was Carmen's world, a bright, warm, and comfortable world. A world Javier had just rejected. And now the gates of that castle were firmly closed to him. Javier couldn't take it anymore. Hunger and thirst conquered his pride. Staggering, he went up the stairs towards the source of light. He found Carmen on the second-floor balcony, sitting comfortably in a rattan rocking chair, reading a thick, leather-bound book. A small reading lamp illuminated her serene face. On the small table next to her was a plate of freshly cut fruit and a cold, misty bottle of mineral water. Javier swallowed. His throat was dry. Carmen. His voice came out broken. Carmen didn't turn her head. She turned a page of the book with a dry sound. You're invading my space, Javier. The second floor is off-limits. I'm hungry, Carmen. I'm thirsty, Javier pleaded, lowering himself to his lowest point. Please, just a little water. Carmen finally closed the book slowly. She looked at Javier. The man was completely broken, sunken eyes, cracked lips, a wrinkled shirt that smelled of sweat. There was nothing left of the arrogant CEO who was shouting yesterday. There's tap water in the kitchen. The running water supply still works. It won't be as cold as this mineral water, but it will be enough to survive, Carmen replied dryly. Tap water. Javier looked at her in disbelief. During his 5 years of marriage, he had only drunk imported mineral water, or at least a branded one. You're telling your husband to drink tap water? Ex-husband, Carmen corrected. And besides, beggars can't be choosers, Javier. Before you married me, you drank boiled water in your small student apartment, didn't you? Think of it as a trip down memory lane. Javier knelt. Not for dramatic effect, but because his legs really gave out. He crawled to Carmen's feet, trying to take her hand. Carmen, I'm sorry, he sobbed. I was an idiot. I was crazy. It was Valeria. She manipulated me. She's a bad woman. I realize now. My only love is you, Carmen. Carmen pulled her foot back as if avoiding something dirty. She looked at Javier with the gaze of a researcher observing a disgusting sample under a microscope. Don't use the word love, Javier. You insult my intelligence, Carmen said coldly. You didn't love me. You loved the comfort I provided. And you don't hate Valeria because she's bad. You hate her because she left you when you ran out of money. If I gave you 500,000 euro right now, you would run to find her. Javier shook his head vehemently. His crocodile tears splashed. No, Carmen, no. I've realized you're the best wife. Give me a second chance. We can start over. I promise to be an obedient husband. I'll do anything. Don't kick me out. I have no one. Carmen picked up the water bottle from the table. Javier looked at it with hopeful eyes. Slowly, Carmen poured the contents of the bottle into a nearby flower pot. The clear water sank into the dry soil. See that pot, Javier? Carmen asked softly. It withered because I forgot to water it for a week. But as soon as I water it, it will revive. Its roots are still strong. Carmen looked Javier sharply in the eyes. But our marriage is not a withered pot. Our marriage is a tree that you chopped down, burned, and urinated on its ashes. Nothing can grow there again. Go drink tap water and sleep. Your time is running out. Carmen reopened her book, ignoring Javier's sobs that echoed in the luxurious hallway. To Carmen, that crying was not a sign of remorse, but the sound of a dying ego. 6 hours remained. 2 a.m. Javier couldn't sleep. After drinking lukewarm, chlorine-flavored water from the tap in the dark kitchen, he tried to find another way out. He needed an ally. He needed help. He remembered that in the living room desk drawer, which Carmen had ransacked during yesterday's audit, was his old physical phone book. Before everything was stored digitally on his now useless mobile phone, the important numbers of his old friends, university classmates, and his first business partners were there. With the help of the moonlight, Javier found the address book. He took the only working means of communication, the landline phone, to a corner, sat on the floor, and began to dial. First call to his university classmate Sergio, now a bank director. Hello? Who is this at 2 in the morning? Sergio's voice sounded sleepy and irritated. Sergio, it's Javier. Javier Garcia. There was a brief silence. Javier, are you crazy? Calling at this hour. What's wrong? Sergio, I need help. I have a small liquidity problem. I need a cash loan. I'll pay you back double next week as soon as my assets are unfrozen. A long sigh was heard on the other end. Javier, haven't you seen the news yet? What news? The alumni group chat is on fire. Last night at 9, Mendoza Holding issued an official press release. The CEO of Innovatech has been fired for an embezzlement and ethics violation scandal. Your picture was all over it. It's already spread on LinkedIn. Javier felt his blood run cold. Carmen wasn't kidding. She was systematically assassinating his reputation. I'm sorry, Javier. I work in a bank. I can't be associated with someone on the Bank of Spain's blacklist. Don't call again. Click. The connection was cut. Javier trembled. He dialed a second number. A business partner, Yvonne, with whom he used to party. The number didn't exist. Third number. His mother in the village. Javier hesitated. He hadn't been home in 3 years. He used to be embarrassed. He had promised to come back driving a luxury car and take care of his parents. Now he had to call to ask for a place to sleep. But he had no other choice. He dialed his parents' home number. Only the dial tone sounded unanswered. It was logical. Old people in the countryside go to bed early. Javier hung up the receiver. He felt the world shrinking around him. Carmen had not only taken his money, she had taken his name. In the business world, reputation is currency. Without it, Javier was just a middle-aged man with no special skills and a criminal record. Who would want to hire an ex-CEO fired for stealing his wife's money? Suddenly the phone rang. Javier jumped. Who would call at this hour? Valeria? Had she changed her mind? With a trembling hand, Javier picked up the receiver. Hello. Good morning, Mr. Garcia. It was the voice of Carmen's lawyer, Mr. Morales. His voice was fresh and professional, as if he didn't need sleep. What do you want? Javier hissed. Just to remind you, Mr. Garcia, 9 a.m. is the final deadline. At 9:10 a garbage truck will arrive. We recommend you be outside the gate before then. We are not responsible if you are picked up along with the organic waste. You are demons, Javier whispered. We are just enforcing the law, Mr. Garcia. And it was you who started the game. Have a good time collecting your things. The phone hung up. Javier slammed the receiver against the base until it cracked. He screamed into the darkness. A scream of frustration that no one heard, except the silent walls of the house that would soon no longer be his. 2 hours remained. 6 a.m. The sun rose. Its beautiful golden light seemed like a mockery to Javier. Carmen came down from upstairs. She was impeccably dressed in an ivory-colored pantsuit that radiated an aura of authority and purity. Her hair was pulled back in a modern bun, and her face was fresh. She didn't look like a woman who had just divorced her husband, but a woman ready to preside over a board meeting. In her hand, she carried a roll of black plastic. She threw it at Javier, who was sitting blankly on the sofa. The roll landed in his lap. What is this? Javier asked, stunned. Your new luggage, Carmen replied as she headed to the kitchen to make herself a coffee. The Louis Vuitton and Rimowa suitcases in the storage room were purchased with the company card, so they are registered as company assets. You have no right to take them. Javier looked at the roll of large garbage bags in his lap. This was the final humiliation. Carmen was telling him to put his life in a garbage bag. You are truly cruel, Carmen. Hurry up, Javier. Time is running out. Carmen didn't turn around. Take only your clothes. Leave the expensive suits, I bought them with my money. Take your t-shirts, jeans, and underwear. That's the only thing that is purely yours. With indescribable frustration, Javier dragged his feet to the guest room. He opened the closet. Armani Hugo Boss suits and silk shirts hung there. He touched them one last time. Following instructions and fearful of the threat of prison, Javier only took his old clothes. Faded t-shirts, jeans that were now a little too small, and an old hoodie he used when he had just started his business. He stuffed everything into the black garbage bag. The rustling of the plastic sounded incredibly loud in his ears. When he finished packing, he looked at himself in the mirror. He saw the self from 5 years ago. A poor man with big dreams but now without dreams. He had come full circle. He dragged the garbage bag to the living room. Carmen was enjoying her morning coffee as if nothing had happened. Your watch, Carmen said suddenly, pointing to Javier's wrist. Javier looked at the Patek Philippe watch he was wearing. It was the only luxury item he had managed to hide, and that had not been confiscated yesterday. This is a birthday gift. It's mine. Look at the back, Carmen said indifferently. Javier took off the watch and turned it over. He saw a small engraving on the back case. But something was strange. It felt a little lighter, and the second hand moved in jumps. It wasn't the smooth, sweeping motion characteristic of a luxury mechanical watch. It's a replica, Javier, Carmen explained, smiling amusedly. I moved the original to the bank safe 2 days ago, when you were drunk. I swapped it while you were sleeping. You didn't even notice the difference, did you? That proves you only cared about the price, not the value. Javier looked at the watch in his hand in horror. Like his life, even his watch was fake. He threw it on the floor, shattering the crystal. Keep it. Keep everything. Satisfied. Very much, Carmen replied, taking a sip of coffee. Go outside and wait. There are 15 minutes left. The house was silent. A different silence from yesterday. Yesterday was a tense silence. Today was a peaceful silence. Carmen leaned against the door she had just closed. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. She felt light. The burden of pretending to be a fool for 5 years for the sake of her husband's ego. The burden of enduring the heartache of seeing his infidelity. Everything was gone. Is it all over, ma'am? Mrs. Rosa asked, coming out of the kitchen with a glass of warm water with lemon. Carmen opened her eyes and accepted the glass. Yes, it's over, Mrs. Rosa. The house is clean again. Thank God, Mrs. Rosa smiled. Her expression was one of great relief. I've thrown away all the bedding that girl used. I burned it in the backyard. It disgusted me too much to wash it, ma'am. Carmen laughed. A free and fresh laugh. Thank you, Mrs. Rosa. You always know what I'm thinking. Carmen returned to the living room. She looked around. Certainly many things were gone. The original paintings were safely stored, the jewelry in the bank. The house felt a little empty, but this emptiness was a canvas for her new life. Her phone rang, this time her personal phone. The name Dad appeared on the screen. Carmen answered. Hi, Dad. Carmen, I heard the news. I received the full report from the lawyer. Everything has been handled well. Are you okay? Her father's voice sounded worried, but there was also a hint of pride. I'm fine, Dad. Very well, Carmen replied. Excellent. Well done. I'm proud that you finally acted decisively. That parasite needed a lesson. Oh, and the board of directors has approved your proposal. Innovatech, which will now be called Jugendtech, already has a new CEO, a Harvard professional, not a scammer. Are you ready to start working as a senior advisor next Monday? Carmen smiled. She saw her reflection in the large mirror in the foyer. She saw a strong woman. A woman who didn't need the approval of a man who was not her equal. I'm ready, Dad. Next Monday, let's start a new era. Carmen hung up the phone, walked over to the large window overlooking the street, and peeked from behind the curtain. The sidewalk outside was already empty. Javier was gone. His trail had disappeared into the cruel hustle and bustle of Madrid. He was just the past. A divorce statistic. A small footnote in the autobiography of Carmen's success. Carmen turned around and looked at the magnificent living room. 48 hours, she murmured to herself. She had given Javier 48 hours to leave, but in reality, those 48 hours were a gift Carmen had given herself, a time to forgive the foolishness of her past, to rise again and to reclaim her crown. And now the queen was back on her throne. Carmen left the glass and went up the stairs to the master bedroom, her own room. She had big plans, a new decoration, a new business, and a life entirely her own.